It's my favorite time of the year to do cookies, and I know how much you guys love the circle shapes, so I've got another tutorial for you. We're gonna start off with our snowman. So here, about 2/3 up from the cookie, we're gonna do a slight curved outline, and we're gonna divide the face basically on the bottom half, and we're gonna add a toque on the top. When you're piping circles, it's a little bit easier if you look slightly ahead of where your piping line is falling, and it makes it a little bit smoother. Don't worry about getting them perfect. It's really hard to cut a perfect circle shape, let alone pipe a circle perfectly. So we're not about the tiny perfections. We're here about good cookies that make people smile and that taste awesome. So once my outline is dried a little bit, I will go back and do my flood. And I love these circle shapes because not only are they so versatile, they're smaller cookies, they're about 3 inches across, so they're really quick to decorate. They don't take a lot of icing and they don't take a lot of dough. And so you can really turn out quite a few in a batch. So when you're doing events or holidays like Christmas, these are a great idea for gifts, or if you're selling cookies, you can get a lot done in less time. And now we're gonna outline the top of his toque. And so with my outline consistency, I'm gonna put in a little squiggly line, and this is to prevent craters. And then right away, I'm gonna flood. I don't like to let that squiggly line dry. The only reason I let my outline dry is to hold the shape. And so if I let the squiggly line dry, it becomes kind of hard. And sometimes my tip of the bag touches the icing and it kind of nicks it off the cookie, and it ends up floating around a little bit in my flood or it peeks out. So I don't want that to happen, so I find it better if it's not dry. It's not the end of the world, lots of people let it dry. So again, whatever works best for you. These things that I'm teaching you is just from my own experience and the way I do cookies. It makes it easier for me and gets me the best results, but it doesn't mean that it's the right way to do things. So if something else works for you better, always make sure you do what makes it easier and better for you. We're gonna let that red dry. And I'm gonna go in with my green outline consistency and just do the edges there. I don't need to outline anything else. And I'm gonna put in my squiggly line here. This is a narrow area. So any small areas, narrow areas, that's the most prone to craters. That's where you wanna put your squigglies. Even if you can't fit a full squiggle, even putting a line of icing, sometimes you'll see me doing really small areas, that also helps. It's just giving the middle of that area a little bit of support so it doesn't collapse. And I started with the white on the bottom and then I did the red because I can do those two sections at the same time. And then I let them dry a little bit and I come back and do my green. So you can see the difference between the green icing and that red icing that's crusted over. It's not fully dry, but it's dry enough that my icing is not melting together. It's kind of staying a little bit separate because one's already dry. And then I'm just using my scribe to kind of smooth out that line. And once that crusts over, so you leave that for like 20 to 30 minutes. If you have a fan running close by, it helps to speed up the process a bit. If you're air drying, might take a little bit longer, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on how humid your area is. It really varies depending on the climate. But if you have a fan nearby, that always helps to dry the cookies a little quicker. And then we're gonna add some detail on his toque here, and we're just doing little small lines. So I'm not lifting my piping bag up too much, just hovering over the cookie, and that will give me a smooth line. I don't want to draw the line necessarily on top. I'm just touching down, securing the icing, slightly lifting it up, and then touching it back down. And you can see I have a few peaks on the end where I'm pulling my bag away. You can always go in with your scribe after and just kind of push them down, or you kind of reset them in the icing so it's not sticking up so much. Little things again, if it bothers you, fix it. If you're doing a million cookies this Christmas, do you really need to do this for every cookie? Probably not. Nobody will notice those things. But I'm just giving you the option, for little things that we do. And is it worth the time or not is up to you to do it. And there's times where I just let it go. And sometimes, it bothers me a little bit too much. I won't fix every imperfection, but I tried to fix the obvious ones, in my eyes anyways. And then we're gonna add his nose here. And this is my outline orange. But you can see I'm able to smooth it out with the scribe. So I put enough icing there so I'm able to kind of float the scribe in that icing and smooth it out and fix the shape of it a little bit. And then I'm gonna add the eyes here with my outline black. And then of course, a mouth. So little half circles. When I'm doing these small little circles, I'll lift up my piping bag just so slightly. So the smaller, shorter lines, you barely lift your piping bag up. The bigger lines, you have more space. And our snowman's all done. Now into our second cookie. This will be our Santa cookie. Really like the way this one turned out. It's a few more steps than, let's say, the snowman cookie, but it's really, really fun. So here I'm just outlining his coat. So I'm doing it all in red here. So the middle part is slightly curved to kind of give him a little bit of a belly. And that will be his belt and sort of the white part of his coat in the middle. And then I'm outlining the sections that I will be doing in red. And then I'm going to go in with my outline consistency and do the sections that are smaller here. This top section is not too small. It's kind of round and big. It's not narrow. It's not tiny. So I don't really need anything in there. But if you're not sure, it's always better, I would say, to do a squiggle than not do a squiggle. So it's not going to hurt it if you do one. And then I'm just going to go in my scribe and smooth out the icing. And when I'm doing these cookies, and I know I'm doing smaller cookies like this that aren't so big, they don't have a lot of surface area, you know, these can kind of fit nicely in the palm of my hand. I try to think of my flood and not make it too loose, too runny, because I know a lot of the areas that I'm flooding are kind of smaller. So if I have a really loose flood, I don't have as much control as if it's a little bit thicker. So a loose flood for me is one I don't really have to use my scribe. A little bit of a thicker flood, I don't want to go too crazy, but it smooths out on its own, but needs sometimes a little bit of help from the scribe. So that's sort of the difference between the floods. Neither is good or bad. It's up to you, you know, what's easier for you to work with. Sometimes I try to make a looser or a thicker flood and it doesn't turn out exactly. So you can tell some of my consistencies in my colors, all my floods, they're not exactly the same. You know, you use some are looser, some are thicker. So you just kind of go with it. If you need your scribe, you go ahead with your scribe. If you don't, then it's okay. And we're going to fill in his belt here, and I'm going to use my outline consistency. So you can see there's a lot of ripples in it. There's a lot of marks in it from how I piped it. But because this section is small, I'm going to go in with my scribe right away, but I've got to work it quite a bit because this is a larger section. So I got to move a little bit quicker. I don't want to wait too long till it dries, but just jiggling it. And as I jiggle it, it sort of settles on its own and you can see it becomes nice and smooth. I use my outline consistency there because it's kind of a narrow area. I don't want it to crater, and I didn't have too many areas that I needed to flood in black. So I didn't really want to make another flood consistency just for a tiny area. And then again, I'm going to go in with my white outline consistency here. Again, it's a small area, so I can fill it in. My outline is not super stiff. It's able to be smoothed out. And it just helps in preventing craters and making so many consistencies sometimes. And it also dries a little bit faster when your icing's thicker. And then I'm going to go and do his belt. And this is my outline consistency as well here. And I'm just taking my time, putting my bag very close to the cookie and putting quite a bit of pressure so that it sort of bubbles out and makes a nice thick belt. And then you can fix it up with your scribe if you make it a little bit more square looking or need to smooth it out. But if I were to outline and then flood that little belt, it would be pretty tough to do. So it's just easier to do it with your outline consistency. And we just use that when we want it to hold its shape or we're doing small sections that we don't want our flood going everywhere. It's just easier to control. And then here, I'm just outlining his beard. So I'm just doing a rough outline, making a nice big beard all the way down to his belly. And then I'm just gonna add a squiggle. Now, again, it's not the most narrow area near the bottom of the beard. It's a little bit narrow, but I really want this to be a nice puffy looking beard and I don't want to risk any craters. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some squiggles because it doesn't hurt. And I'd rather be safe than sorry at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and flood it. And notice how my outline is not dry. So my flood, it's kind of pushing those lines out. And so that's the difference between having a dry outline and having a wet outline that you did not wait for it to dry. And so I'm just filling in this beard and I just got to smooth it out here. And I'm just bringing it to the edges, making it a little bit nicer, fixing up the shape a bit. And I already know my limitations of, freehand piping stuff with an outline. It's not the greatest, especially when there's a lot of curves and corners. And so those are the times where I don't like to let my outline dry. When I have the outer edge of a cookie and I'm outlining it, there's a guide there for me to go. And so I kind of get it right. But when it's something freehand like this, I like it to be a little bit flexible so I can fix it up with my scribe. And I love the way it turned out. It looks so cute. Next up, we have Rudolph. Now again, you can see how high my bag is relative to the cookie because we're going for a nice, smooth, straight line. And then as I come down to the beginning of the circle again that I've piped, I touch down, bring my bag down. You let go of the pressure of the bag, you bring it down a little bit, and you attach it again. And then I'm going to go ahead and flood my cookie. And one good thing about having two consistencies is not only do you have an outline that you could use for your details, but if you ever run out of flood icing, you can always thin down more of your outline. And most sets, I usually have my outline left over. And so for you, if you run out of flood, you try to go and match the color exactly. It's quite hard. So if you have icing left over that you could thin down, again, that's already the color it needs to be. It just works out really, really good. It saved me a few times. Now that the base has crusted over, it's dry enough for us to pipe the next layer. We're going to pipe a big, big nose here. So I'm using my outline consistency, and I don't want it to fully dry the base because when it's crusted over but it's still wet underneath, it's a really good time to do your details because it also helps prevent craters. So not only do we do the squiggles, but we also try to do the next layer when the base is just crusted over, and that really helps keep that icing nice and puffy and not kind of indent or cave in on itself. So I've done the squigglies here just in case. I try to use all the methods I can to prevent things from going wrong. So, combining a few methods if you can works even better. And again, I didn't let that outline dry for one reason, that it's not the perfect kind of circle, might be bigger on one side than the other. So this with my scribe, I can kind of use to push it outwards a bit, make it more round, fit the cookie a little bit better. And it also blends in the outline a bit and it looks really great. So here I'm just going to add a couple of his antlers. And this is my black outline consistency. And just little ones because this is a very small cookie and we still got to make his eyes. And you can see how that outline holds its shape. Anything that I pipe, it's not going anywhere. That's what we want to look for when we are making our outline consistency. And then again with my outline white consistency, I'm adding two big, nice, puffy eyes. And then right away, I'm going to go in with my black icing. This is my outline again. And then I'm going to squiggle it with my scribe bit, and that will just settle everything nice and smooth. You see how his eyes just smooth over. And then I'm going to take my white outline consistency, push a little bit of icing out, get some on the tip of my scribe there, and just touch it down into the eye. And this added detail makes such a difference when you're making eyes. Some people hate making eyes, but I just love it. I think it's so fun to pipe them and just add this detail, and it really, really makes them just come to life and they just takes it to a whole new level. And then we're just gonna do a little detail here, add some ears. And again, I'm just using my outline consistency and then right away with the same outline, just filling it in. And because it's a very small area, I'm just gonna use my thick icing and take my time to smooth it out. And then I can also kind of move it around. It's a nice puffy icing like this. It stands off the cookie really nicely because I've used that outline consistency. And then we do the same on the other side. And again, for me to freehand this and make it perfect and identical to the other side might not be the best when I'm piping it. So as I'm working it with the scribe, I'm kind of looking at the other side and trying to make it as even as possible. And I think he came out just super adorable. All right, now we're on to our elf cookie. So again, similar to our Santa cookie, we're gonna outline his jacket first. Oh, and my outline broke a little bit, but that's okay. It actually ended up going where it looked pretty good, so I just left it as is. Sometimes mistakes work out in our favor. And then, unlike Santa's cookie, I'm just gonna leave a top section here as well. And anytime I want to secure my icing, I'll touch it down to the icing, or I will touch it down to the cookie, and that will really secure it and make sure it's not going anywhere. Sometimes, like you saw in the beginning there, where I didn't quite secure it enough, the icing kind of lifted up with my bag, but that's okay. If we have mistakes, you can always use your scribe and scrape it off, and then just keep going. A scribe is a super cheap tool, but it comes in handy, like, you know, one of my main cookie things. If you're just starting out with cookies and you don't really want to buy supplies, you know, buy yourself a scribe. Toothpicks are also good, but they're quite small to work with. So it really, really, really comes in handy. Now in all our sections here, we're just going to add green squiggles with our outline again. And then I'm going to flood right on top here before my squiggles dry. And in smaller areas when I'm flooding, I don't put so much pressure on the bag. So you can see that it's not too much icing bubbling out. If I'm doing a large cookie, I'll put a lot of pressure out because I want to fill the cookie faster. But with smaller areas, make sure you keep control of your icing bag, especially your flood, because your flood is flowing freely. So it doesn't need that much pressure on it to come out. It's already going to come out with gravity. So you just want to put slight pressure. And as you do more cookies, you'll kind of get the feeling of how much to put and how much to go. But your icing should be bubbling out of your tip a little bit. Now we're going to put this aside to dry for a little while, and then we'll come back and we'll do the insides. So I'm just going to outline the edges here of the white sections, and that will be just finishing off his coat. And this is with my outline consistency. And there you go, you can see another kind of, as I moved away, the icing sort of went with me. So I just fixed it, being lazy, not using my scribe, I just fixed it with the tip of my bag. And then adding some squiggles in there. And then right away, I'm just gonna flood on top. So you can see the jacket kind of coming together a little bit. And we leave that space in the middle as that's gonna be his belt. And this will be similar to Santa's belt as well. I'm going to use my outline here just to fill it in. So you can see that I'm kind of squiggling my bag around, I'm moving it around, I'm shaking it. And the reason being is to smooth it out as I go. The thicker royal icing is, the faster it dries. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be super dry fast and you can't do anything about it. It just starts to crust over and it leaves marks, you know, when you're going in with your scribe. So what I'm trying to do is, as I'm piping it, I'm trying to smooth it out as I go. But of course it's not going to be perfect, but I've done a lot of the work already. So then when I go in with my scribe, it won't take too much work to smooth it out nicely. And again, I'm trying to go fast here, just do as much squiggles, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You can also tap your cookie on the table. That usually helps kind of smooth out any flood or any kind of thicker sections like I have here. So whichever method you prefer, whatever is easier for you. Sometimes if you have other sections that aren't fully dry, you don't want to quite tap your cookie too hard because it might crack the icing a little bit. And then our final touch will be the top of his jacket here. We're just adding some details. So this is my red outline consistency. And again, with these lines here, I'm touching down on each corner, on each tip. And while I let that dry, I'm going to do the section of his belt here in yellow. And again, just taking my time, going slow, putting a lot of pressure so that it kind of comes out nice and thick. I'm not doing a thin line. And because I'm not lifting up my bag, it's kind of bubbling out and creating that thick belt. And then I'll just go in and smooth it a little bit with my scribe. If you need a good royal icing recipe that's no bleed, that tastes amazing and is easy to work with and is what I use all the time for all my cookies, make sure you check out my channel. I've recently posted a new one and it's got rave reviews, so make sure you try it out. So here we're going to go in with our squiggle. And then I'm just going to add some details because I'm already using my outline consistency here and I don't want to keep switching bags. So I'm just going to add this detail while we're here and just add a few of these dots on the bottom of this red area. And then I'm going to go in with my flood icing and flood right on top here. Now these corners, these little V sections, you could say, are very narrow and very thin. So as I get down to those sections, I really let go of the pressure of my bag and I almost just let, whatever's coming out or drag it down because I don't want to overfill those areas and risk the icing going over the side. So I go as far as I can without putting too much icing there in the corner, and then I will pull any more icing that I can right down to the corners. So you see me kind of working the icing down towards the corner, just so I don't see my outline and it doesn't look too rounded. I want to be it nice and pointy. So again, the scribe tool is like one of my best tools that I can recommend because it does so many tricks for you. And that is our elf cookie. And last but not least, I have my gingerbread man. So here we're just going to do a sort of wavy line across the top third of the cookie. And then we're going to outline the bottom, which will be his face. And just take your time when you're outlining. I used to go really, really slow when I started out. Even for the first year or so, it took me a long time because I was being very, very careful. So don't worry about being slow. A lot of people think that, you should be typing super fast because that's what it looks like on Instagram and Facebook and all these, short clip videos. But we only speed up those videos because we always had a time limit of how long those videos could be. But this is real-time decorating, and so I can kind of work a little bit faster. But if you need to go slower, don't think you're too slow. It's totally normal. And I've probably decorated thousands and thousands of cookies by now. So for me, I can know my speed and my pressure. But take your time, go slow, get a good feel for it. So I've just added those red dots in to the brown icing while it was still wet because I wanted a nice flat look. So you can see now that it's dry, the icing is not on top. It's kind of level with the brown. And then I've outlined the top of the head, and then I'm going to go in and flood it. Just being careful to nicely flood it against that brown icing and letting my icing do all the work. And you notice how slow I went in that section, and then the other kind of middle I can go a little bit quicker. And this is the icing on his head. And then now that's dry, I'm going to add the details on his face. So I've got my outline black consistency here, and I've added a couple eyes. And if you need to smooth out any peaks, sometimes when you pipe these eyes, you need to have a little peak left over, just go in with your scribe. Had to add a little bit more icing to that second eye. It looked a little bit too small for the other eye. And then we're just going to add a little brown nose here. And again, you can see I have a little peak there, so I go in with my scribe and just smooth it out. And royal icing is kind of cool that way, that when it's thick, but you jiggle it around and it kind of settles into itself. So it's pretty neat. And then we're just going to add a smile here. So a gentle smile from one red dot to the other. And then we're going to add a little bit of a detail. So I'm going to put a little bit of pressure and drag my bag down. Very, very tiny pressure, not a lot because this is a very tiny detail. Just add some holly to his head. And then I'm going to turn the cookie here just to make it comfortable for myself. I'm going to squeeze a little bit of icing, put a little bit of pressure, and then sort of drag the bag down. And then with my red outline consistency, I'm going to add a few dots here just to complete the holly. And it's just these little details that make it so fun. And I love doing these because they're really simple, fast, but they look so beautiful. I hope you enjoyed these cookies and you get a chance to try them this Christmas. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, happy baking.